The State of the World Population is a publication that UNFPA launches globally, as you can see here, every year, and we have done so since 1978. Every year this report has come out. We have discussed various topics that are important to the world. Urbanization, migration, what does it mean in humanitarian setting? This year, of course, it is about the 8 billion people who we share this planet with. And we call it infinite possibilities. Why do we call it infinite possibilities? Because I want to counter this notion of anxiety. I want to counter the notion of the sort of the ticking bomb and all of that. Because if population policy is done correctly with the data available, with intentionality behind it, every person holds promise. Every person has opportunity and is a possibility for the world to improve. So that is why we call it infinite possibilities. And I think that message is really very, very important. In the time that we have this session today, it's about 3 hours. How many possibilities are created in Kenya? How many babies are born in Kenya? I did the calculation as I'm sitting there. There will be no prize for the one who has the correct answer. It's about 500 Kenyans, new Kenyans, small babies, have been born in the time that we have gathered here today. So can we say, Karibuni sana to these watoto who have just joined us in our midst? And I mean this really from the bottom of my heart, because that baby is a gift to us as a community. That baby is a gift to the local community, to that family. But when we come back to the intentionality, is that what is it that we offer that new person to enable them to thrive, to enable them to be healthy, to enable them to get an education, to enable them to thrive in a rural community, or as our colleague from the government has said, in the urban setting. We need intentionality behind our actions, behind our policies, to be able to make sure that this becomes a possibility, this becomes an opportunity for all of us as Kenyans, but of course also globally. Now, here in my speech, I will take and plug some different bits of it. If you go back and look at the demographic situation of South Korea in the mid-1970s in terms of the population pyramid, how it was made up of young people, babies, old people, etc. That population pyramid, and I think Dr. Bernard was talking about the demographic dividend, it looked pretty much the same that Kenya looks like today. And they translated that demographic dividend, that possibility, that opportunity into a growth miracle. Today, when we talk about buying vehicles from, it used to be Japan, right, or products, a lot of it is now coming from South Korea. The GDP per capita in South Korea is today higher than that of Japan. So, can we reproduce that in the context of Kenya? The 0.7% of the world population, I don't know what sub-percentage we're here in the room, but can we, that is really the intentionality. How can those 500 babies that have been born in these 3 hours, how can they be included in that miracle that we would like to produce as Kenya? We have seen data today on fertility, on growth rates, on deaths, on births, etc. We have heard from panelists today how important it is about choice, that the woman is empowered to make the choice with the family. If they can have 7 blessings in their family, great, but make sure they all go to school. If we don't have school money, maybe we want to plan differently so that we have 3. So that intentionality is behind, so we can reproduce that South Korean economic miracle here in Kenya. I am really happy that we waited to launch. This report came out a few months back, but we intentionally waited to launch it jointly with the report over here, the Kenyan one. And I want to really sincerely thank NCPD for the partnership, and that we do it, Pamoja, in this way. Because it's not about launching a report, it's about creating the dialogue about what we do with our population, about what we do with these new babies that have been born. It's not about, as we heard, too many or too few. In some countries, yes, maybe there are a case to me that there are too many. Maybe in some families there are too many. But in some families there are too few, in some countries there are too few. But only if we invest in the empowerment of women, of families, to make that choice in an informed way, where they have access to good health care, they have access to health care so they don't. And it's not just about family planning, it's also about making sure that the child survives. How many times have you heard, oh, let me get a few extra babies in case one of them die? I mean, we say it lightly, but it is actually part of the psychology sometimes, right? But if we have good health care, if we have the environment, family planning is available, if you choose to use it, then people do have a real choice. And that is what it is about. So it's not about too many or too few. But still, as we were sitting here, I was reflecting about my own career in the space of population. And we are launching here a report of 8 billion people, which is very interesting. And I was reflecting back. I thought to myself, am I getting old? I don't feel older, but it's not long ago. I swear I was at a launch for another report. It was 7 billion. Which year was that? Some of you will know. It was in 2011. I had traveled from New York. I had taken up a position in India as deputy representative, and we were launching the report for 7 billion. Of course, the launch was a big one because at the time, India was the most populous country, the second most populous country in the world, and China was the most populous, but everyone knew that, that this would change over time. And actually this year, if you have seen in the news, the population of India has actually surpassed that of China. So there's a lot of big shifts happening in the world. And the ticking bomb reference actually came from India back then. There was a very famous book around that. But we understood that that forced top-down population control was a very failed policy. We don't even want to talk about it. Huh? Let's be very honest. And I'm so glad that we have replaced that with an approach that is based on human rights, that is based on the individual choice of the woman and the family, to see what can we do with our families and how can we support them to thrive so they become a possibility and opportunity. But we also have to look at where we placed in the world as Kenya. And I think for the most part, when we celebrate the report, we celebrate the results and the leadership that Kenya has taken in terms of good population policies. Of course, there are some gaps here and there. There are things that can improve. I'm not saying everything is perfect. There are also regional gaps between counties, etc. But Kenya has done relatively well in an African context. And I want to congratulate everyone here and also NCPD for the leadership in that. But I think Kenya needs to really look broader, also regionally, to see what is our role as Kenyans in this. If you look at between 2011 and today, 12 years, we're now from the report of the 7 billion to the 8 billion. That's a billion extra people. That's a lot of people in 11 years, and I have only lost a little bit of hair in that period of time. So how does this translate into various continents? Actually, if you look at just babies born every single year, it's about 140 million. It's around that, approximately 140 million. About 1/3 of 1 in 3 will be an African, will be born on the African continent, right? But that will grow over time. So if we go fast forward to the scenario of 2050, where we will have 80 million Kenyans, at that time, probably every second baby maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm giving you rough figures to give an idea, because we want a conversation about how do we stimulate that intentionality behind our actions and policies, is that 1 in 2 babies will probably be African in the world. And as we know, in 2050, when there will be 80 million Kenyans, about 2 billion of the world's population will be on the African continent, right? So what does that mean for Kenya, which probably will have higher economic growth, will have will be also a magnet, I would think, for people who want to come and be successful. They would want to come here to Kenya. It's a good place to be, right? So I think in terms of intracontinental migration, issues affecting Africa as a continent, I think Kenya needs to take a very, very strong engagement in that, to look at what should be achieved in the future. Kenya has a history here, and I really want to congratulate Kenya for being the host of the ICPD 25 Summit in 2019. We now have, in a few weeks, we have a very big African dialogue happening in Lusaka. All African countries are coming together to discuss these very issues for the ICPD plus 30, which is a year from now, but the preparatory continental conversations under the leadership of the African Union Commission will happen in Lusaka in the beginning of November. We also have a delegation from Kenya going. We hope they can be at the highest level possible. But it's very important that Kenya continues to take the leadership, to articulate its wants for the 500 who have joined us during these 3 hours, but also to understand what is it that Kenya needs to do to prepare for 2050, when there will be 2 billion Africans on this African continent. So there is a lot of food for thought. I think you will realize today that when we walk out of here, we will have more questions than answers. And that is a good thing, because that will stimulate that dialogue that is so needed to continuously happen, so that we can ensure that the demographic dividend is realized not only for Kenya but for Africa, to make sure that every woman has the right to choose, that make sure that everyone is free of violence, and make sure that every young person, including the 500 new Kenyans who have joined us here today are properly supported to join us on a very excellent journey into a bright future for the continent and for Kenya. Asanteni sana.